Hello and welcome to the 22nd and probably final episode live stream of the Mike McNair Revolutionary Strategy Series. We have the original, the core, the elite panel today. It's small, but by God, is it good? We have all the way from Arizona, the two-headed beast, Lex. How's it going?
It's going.
Yeah, it's going pretty well. Let's see. It's going to be my birthday in a few days. And wow. Well, for most of my year, I've been doing live streams. Yeah, for most of my adult life. Yeah, I've been doing live streams about Mike McNair. And
I came out of the womb doing a podcast about Mike McNair.
And this is the end of it. It's the end of an era, Tom. Now we are supposed to have some kind of wrap-up episode maybe after all this. So people that are especially hungry being like 22, that's not enough. There should be another
5 more seasons of McNair. Never canceled.
Never cancelled. So let's hit straight into it because we want to do McNair and we want to maybe also get into a bit of Paul Cockshot's critique of McNair, which is pretty good in places and then pretty bad in places, but it's definitely an interesting critique. So Let's get to it. Okay, so we did Reform and Revolution last week, so we are going to, we've got 2 sections I think left. Let's hit it with Fight for an Opposition. Okay, or Sophie, do you want to read Fight for an Opposition? Take the first 2 or 3 paragraphs.
Sure. As I have argued, the present problem is not to fight for a workers' government, but for an opposition that will openly express independent interests of the working class, Chapter 7, without beginning with the struggle for an opposition. There is no chance of confronting in the future the problem of an alternative government authority to that of the capitalists. In parliamentary regimes, which are now a common form across most of the globe, the capitalists rule immediately through the idea that the point of elections is to give a legitimacy to a government that heads up the bureaucratic, corrosive state, and electing representatives to the parliament or other representative bodies is only a way of choosing a government. This fetishism of government forces the formation of parties and coalitions in which the capitalists immediate paid agents have a veto over policy, and creates the corrupt monopoly of the professional politicians. Within its political regime, to govern is to serve capital, and therefore to create a coalition that aims to pose as within this political regime, to govern is to serve capital, and therefore to create a coalition that aims to pose as an alternative government within its political regime is to serve capital. To fight for an opposition is to insist that we will not take responsibility for government without commitment to a fundamental change in the political regime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot to say on that. But,
well, I think this has actually been a point of disagreement to a degree between us, Tom, and that I basically take this from McNair. Like, this is it's kind of a good way of thinking of the rational reasons that people don't want to do electoralism, even if they'll win. And in a way, especially if they'll win. Now, most of the conversations you'll practically have about electoralism in organizing is, but that'll never work. We can't, we're not going to just win an election against this well-funded candidate. But McNair is taking a different tack. Even if you do win, you'll probably you're going to be bound to govern this state unless you have a mandate to do otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I've had kind of disagreement with it. I've let me put this correctly. I don't disagree with his point, but we're talking about how you would go about getting to a situation whereby you have a large party that can actually do this thing. Okay, if you're in England or if you're in America, you can't get to a stage where you have control of the party to actually do it. So in those situations, like it's, you know, these are just alternative strategies. Like, I'm not somebody who's big into entryism. I don't have firm opinions on it yet, but I do think that there is a case to be made for entryism, where you have small parties that are blocked for your non-PR systems. I think there is a case for it. But let me finish before, right? Like, just for example, today there was a clip going around on Twitter from Sky News, and it was about one of their political shows, their main political shows in the UK, and it was about the front page of the FT. Now, the front page of the FT apparently this weekend came out in big words on the front cover. I think it was bright yellow, and they said capitalism needs a reboot. And they literally were talking on Sky News about how if they don't do something, the communists and the socialists are going to take over the country. Like, not in a way, they're not talking in a way like, oh, Jeremy Corbyn's a communist or anything. They're actually kind of saying the system is so messed up at the moment that if we don't do something, we're going to get the commies in, right? That's incredible, right? The fact that they would even say that. And it's not, they're not talking about it from a scaremongering point of view. It was more like an analysis of how messed up things are at the moment in the UK. And these were like, yeah, it's incredible. So the thing here is that, like, if we look at the phenomenon of Corbyn, whether he gets in or not, like, for me, I don't think getting in will work in any long-term sense. We're not going to get socialism out of it or communism, right? So I don't think that. So, but like, what we can see from the fact of them even being in opposition and having, reasonably, radical social democratic type policies, that it's causing, like, the Tories, for example, is causing them to very much shift their politics to the left. They're now gone to basically they're saying they're going to spend an incredible amount of extra, they're going to deficit spend, and they're going to, like, pump money, whether they will or not. They're saying they're going to do it. And I think it's definitely had an impact on a lot of the different policies they want to get through. They never actually did them in the last parliament. So, like, if you could imagine whereby you could take over and ratchet the policy further and further left and democratize your Labour Party or your Democratic Party more and more and more and more, make it radical, it'll actually pull at the minimum, even if you don't get into the government, it will pull the Republicans or the Tories or whoever they are to the center. And, like, like, at that point when you're doing that, then you can implement, like, his one, why we're saying you get to the stage where you're radical enough and you say, right, fuck this capitalism shit anyway. We're not even going to take power the next time. Fuck yous, you do it. Like, so I think you could get to his position there, but I don't see how you can even get to this, how you can even get to implement this strategy in countries like the UK or the US without actually going into these parties.
Okay, and I think that's, like, a sort of salient point, is that when you're dealing with a first past the post system, it affects strategy. And I'm not sure I'm totally sold on what you're saying. Maybe this leads to an abstentionist strategy or something in first past the post systems. However, the thing I definitely agree on is that, like, that's an important variable that's not really talked about here. And it's one of the first things you learn in, like, political science when you comparing democracies or comparing, bourgeois constitutional regimes.
This kind of reminds me of conversations we've had in the past, to where I make a distinction even between the US and the UK, specifically the Democratic Party versus the Labour Party. And it seems like I don't know if you've changed your views, but you've kind of, like, elaborated more on your views and, like, accepted a degree of skepticism. But I think overall, I still have, like, I guess to say like when a debate and try to make the Democratic Party sound worse than the Labor Party, and then you go in the past you've like insisted that they're more similar than I understand. It makes me feel even less confident about a kind of entryist version of the strategy at all, honestly. And I think again, like that is specific to, maybe we're more in agreement now that I think this applies. This strategy isn't as sound in the U.S. or the U.K. As it would be in a country that doesn't have a first past the post system.
Well, I think I do think that, like, with another 15 years of, if they really, if the Labour Party gets more radical and radical, like, could they move to a situation where they actually, I don't know, like, the party is so fucking,
Right.
the party itself is so currently institutionally, like, managerial, you know.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
could it be taken over and pushed into a different way? I think that you could. I think that's definitely a strategy. For example, it's a strategy you could implement to try and implement. I think it's a strategy.
It is.
I don't see
being attempted in the United States. Like, this is being attempted. Like the DSA.
By who?
Is okay. So there's a section of the DSA that are essentially, you know, Justice Democrats that think that the Democratic Party is their party and they want to change that party. However, there is another section of the DSA that they want to do much of what you're saying, you know, move the conversation. We call it the Overton window. They want to push the Overton window to the left, move that to the left. And then they want to have what's sometimes called a dirty break, where they have an acrimonious split in the Democratic Party between the socialist bloc that they've built up within it once they have enough momentum. Now, I would very much like to see an independent socialist party from the Democrats. However, you know, the one of those that seems the most plausible to me is...
Sorry, can you say it again? They want to build it up and then split at an opportune time.
Yeah, so again, yeah. So there's like roughly, I mean, there's more than two factions in the DSA. But for the ones that are taking part in electoral work and not just spitting the whole time, you know, the ones that are doing Democratic Party stuff and it's part of the strategy that they have in their head, you know, because there are abstentionists in the DSA, you know, for whatever reason. And that want to kind of angle towards social stuff and community organizing. But, you know, I'm not talking about them right now. Sorry. Just, this is between what I would call, you know, like party loyalists and the dirty break faction. And even dirty break is sort of ideologized. It's much more likely to be a kind of a war of attrition with the Democrats having all the resources. But I'm kind of more spiritually sympathetic to the dirty break people than the loyalists.
Like that's just the same old goddamn, you know.
It is, yeah.
Thing from the 1970s. We get in there, we get enough power, and then we split. It's the same old problem. It's just like another trot group trying to take over the thing and then split it off. It's going to go nowhere. It's not.
It's going to go nowhere.
The thing is not about splitting.
But I mean, what about the other strategy? What about the other party strategy where you're going to turn the Democrats, you know, you're going to turn one of the oldest parties in American politics in a fucking revolutionary socialist form. I don't know. Like, yeah, like in the American tradition, they had to start a whole new party to end like slavery. Okay. And so what you need is some kind of breakdown of the party system, and which, you know, may very well be happening because fucking everything is melting down. We have Trump as president, and the Democrats are struggling to find an oppositional voice. Right. So it's not implausible that we're facing a breakdown of the current party system and that there could be some kind of push for realignment. But look, I don't know how you would actually seriously go about forming the next party for the new party system. but I don't know if stapling your fate to the Democrats makes sense.
It seems like both the Republicans and the Democrats are sinking ships, and it's not clear which one's going to sink first, or if they're both going to be able to recuperate, or what exactly is going to happen. But we are. I want to call it a crisis, but we have a situation where a fucking somebody who's been on the WWE and The Apprentice is the president, and you have Democrats who want to only pick people who will lose against that man, right? Like,
hey, what's wrong with the WWE? Anyway, okay.
No, I'm not a WWE hater. It's just the whole mythos around liberalism and like picking smart people to run the country is obviously not the case. And this isn't even a special case. This has happened several times now. It's just so grotesque now and kind of like a I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, it's comic or like silly.
You can't people who are doing satire.
Yeah,
exactly. It's a spectacle. People doing satire suck now because reality does it better for them.
Yeah, satire is. I think I forget who is the quote by, but when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize, satire became obsolete. Like,
right?
Yeah. The big show.
This is who we need today. We need the big show to come in and do a big drama show. It'd be brilliant. He'll take them out. 7'1", the biggest sports entertainer in the world. That's how they build him. Sports entertainer.
No, I won't be satisfied until both candidates are from WWE.
I want to finish my point though real quick though, is that I think this whole McNair strategy, it seems very unfortunate that it's grounded in UK politics in particular. And we both, all three of us here seem to think that there's a flaw in the case of the US or the UK. Is that kind of, are we all on the same page with that?
I don't think it's even that grounded in the UK. It's more of a European book. The thing is, like, I don't think... What am I going to say? Look, the idea, the one thing we're going to get to now in the next section here is about, like, it's not about splits. We got to get away from splits. Okay?
Right.
We got to get away from we got to get to a situation where we enact strategies as a collective unity, and then the strategy works or not, and fuck it, we go on to the next one. That should be our modus operandi instead of splitting because we disagree on strategy. Now, if those guys in the DSA broke off at the right time, okay, maybe it's possible they could absolutely replace the Democratic Party. Like, that's a possibility. But
it's hard to imagine.
Imagine a load of trots saying, "Oh no, we got to wait a bit more before we split." Imagine that.
Right?
Never going to fucking happen. Right. Yeah, they're going to split too early. They won't be able to not split. And that can only be a strategy when you're completely dominant. And even then, you're probably better off just taking over the existing party structure and getting rid of the rest. You know, like, you know what people are like by how quickly they start talking about splits. You know, I was talking to a fella there, previous guest on the show, you know, and the first thing when we were talking about this, you know, he was saying, "Oh yeah, you got to get ready for the split," and you're like, "God damn it!"
My God,
the split is the problem. You know,
this like if you're, I mean, you know, if you're an advocate of a change in the mode of production, you know, like, that may justify being in a different kind of, you know, political formation. And the question is, do you line up with people you kind of have not much to do with initially at all? Like, does a dirty break make sense? Or right now are our choices basically like, you know, do elections with the Democrats or don't do elections? You know, like, I tend to think that it's a little more complicated than that, but, you know, it would only be slightly more complicated than that. Like,
the middle option is, like, you have to be very, very, very selective about how you do and you need to be trolling. Like it's just
Yeah.
and you're trolling and you're trying to like use elections as a means to get revolutionary ideas out into the public, and you're not worried about winning. And and this is again specific to our context, but I think like you have to be very selective about elections.
Well, let's just zoom in on this, like the last paragraph that Sophie read. Do you agree with
one thing
this
I'd like to say is, which one? This one?
Within this political regime, to govern is to serve capital. Does that
I agree with that?
Okay, because
I agree with that. Yeah.
If so, then lining up with one of those parties, that has that goal. It's like look, we'll never actually want that goal. So lining up with them might be tactically useful, right? But ultimately is sort of dishonest about your intentions or something. Or I don't know how to state that exactly.
Could you get control of a party like the Labour Party and actually make their policies so radical that they will not get elected?
Isn't that something that happened in the 1970s? My British history is a little rusty.
No, the Michael Foot got a chance to do it, but I think probably similar to what Corbyn is doing now. Probably not much different.
What about stuff with the quote loony left? Was this in the 1970s with
That was militant. They were like a militant faction that went in. They were a trot faction that went in, a part of the CWI, and but a part of their thing was to actually do a break. A part of the strategy was actually to split in the end. Look, I'm not saying that this is a likely winning strategy. I'm just saying it's a strategy that you could make a case for. Like, I think that you don't want to be in government, right? But I also think you've got to be able to get a political party that's big enough to exist in the system that you're existing in, right? There's no point in having a 1% or a 5% or a 10% party in the UK or the US, because you won't win a goddamn seat, right? That it makes no difference whether you just can't even get to a position where you're going to be dominant enough to threaten capital. You can't get into it. You can't have a 20%. I don't even know. I'm going to shut up. But I do agree with this point. I'm not.
What?
Yeah,
I think this is a state. You can win like a House of Representatives seat or a state legislative position, or something like city council, which I wouldn't recommend, but it's there. You can win those things as a teensy tiny electoral formation. How many of them?
I think about UK, US, or somewhere else. I think we have to keep in mind that the strategy is to win a majority, not a majority of seats, but a majority of support for your minimum program. And so if that is our goal, elections should serve that goal, right? Elections are not the goal. Winning elections are not a goal. Winning the seats are not the goal. The goal is to get a majority. And so if running and winning seats serves that goal, then fine. But if it will distract from that goal, you shouldn't even bother. And I think taking this strategy and like, and a lot of these conversations assume situations that are much more ideal than what we're in now. What we're doing now is, if we're going to bother with electoralism at all, it should just to be like to plant seeds, and that's it, really. Like, we don't even have a party, Yeah,
I mean, I guess that's the way that the early SPD thought, and even Lenin in left-wing communism, when he's like, yeah, I don't care that things are different elsewhere. There's just a principle that you got to use the parliament for propaganda purposes. You got to use the elections for propaganda purposes. Right. And I can see that like still being like a thing. I guess
That's true.
Political
I think that's
yeah.
undeniably true. But like, say for example, you know, my problem with say the DSA trying that thing now is that that's not a dominant idea on the left. I don't think to take over the. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. Like,
Well,
I don't think it's a dominant theory on the left to take over the left wing party.
if I'd agree with that. I don't know if it's dominant, but it.
But wait. Let me finish. Like to turn it into a communist party.
Well, not a communist party.
To turn it into a communist party. Yeah, it's not that. This is what Labour Party Marxist entry is about. It's about turning it into a communist party. That's what it is. It's about like turning it into a Marxist party. You know,
I mean,
and like until like I think until like, you know, remember we're beginning right at the start. You know, all the political formations that have been tried over the last century have been failures. So we're just talking, you know, we're just strategizing, just talking the bullshit. But like until like that the left coalesces around and not just weirdos in, you know, podcasters like us, but actually it becomes the dominant accepted idea on the left. Can that strategy ever hope to work? So like they might have the right strategy, but to me it's like it just won't even work because it's not the right situation. You know, it's like trying to ski down a hill when there's no snow.
Well, yeah. And the question is, what do you do in those lull periods, right? Like when there's nothing going on like that. And the only thing I could say is that, like, you know, for the current, like, kind of climate of social, you know, upheaval, you know, electoral activity is mostly done in the gaps between some of the bigger, you know, uprisings or what have you. You know, like the mass popular mobilizations that end up happening that are obviously antagonistic in a way that existing political actors can't really seize on very effectively, and is often directed against them. It's only really when those things go away, you know, that you get something like electoral activity that seems to correspond with that spirit. You know, it would be interesting to see if there is something genuinely in that trollish spirit that doesn't get subsumed into the machine in some sort of, I don't know, ideal electoral capacity or even, you know, sub-ideal electoral capacity, that when those movements hit, you know, these people use their mouthpieces to fan the flames of discontent and to amplify that kind of shit.
I don't buy into the troll.
But yeah, you don't buy into troll candidates. No.
I don't.
Now that I'm saying it, I'm thinking about people that were like, there are people in the Occupy movement that are upset, and I understand that, and that is why I stand with them, you know, and we'll just kind of say that and move on. Like, there are people that do that. But I don't know, it's hard. It's kind of hard for me to imagine there being people like the early Social Democratic Party of Germany, like when it was just kind of, you know, they had two antagonistic, I don't know, they had two antagonistic, you know, legislators that were just legislators that would just sort of shout at, you know, the rest of them, more or less, that would make their cases passionately and antagonistically. Like, I don't know, like if something like that existed that could plausibly be, you know, plausibly like associate themselves with the next uprising and wouldn't immediately be thrown out because people don't already fucking hate them, which is totally hard to imagine. Like, I can see some role for elections there. But the reason that I'm going for troll candidate, Tom, is because I don't want to be an abstentionist and ignore elections entirely. And given the playing field that I see before me, you know, it's hard for me to imagine working with the Democrats in a productive way.
I've got a really dumb thing to say. Right, I'm going to say it, and I'm putting forward
I'm
the
ready.
case that it's dumb. Didn't the right wing come in and take over the SPD?
Yeah, I mean,
And the
well,
SPD is still one of the biggest parties in Germany at the moment. It's like second biggest party, I think.
now, Tom, you know why in advance that seems dumb.
I know it's a dumb question. I know, that's why I said it's dumb. Like that
Now,
I'm fully aware of that's a dumb question. Right.
It has
But,
occurred
like,
to you that the state and capital, you know, are lined up behind something that supports state and capital.
That's why I'm saying it's dumb. Okay. But, like, the thing is that, you know, I as a kind of I do think it's possible that parties can be taken over and their nature changed. Look at the Republican Party in America.
Mm-hmm.
It was the party of the, it was well, not just under Trump, under Lincoln. It was the party against slavery. And now it's the goddamn, from Lincoln to Trump. It's the racist party.
Right.
Right. And, like, we can't get too, like, caught up in the fact that this party represents what it does now in some sense. I think that that's kind of a misleading. These party formations can completely change. You know, I think they can completely change. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that a Labour Party could go from a kind of a Labour aristocracy. What would you call the Labour Party? It's some kind of Labour aristocracy kind of trade union party to Social Democrat Party to a radical democratic socialist party. I don't think that shift is an impossible shift. Now, I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm not going to say that it's correct, the right strategy or anything, but I don't think that shift is an impossibility. And I think but I do agree with the fact that you've got to stay not as the government. I'm just saying, like, the big thing is what we want to get to is a situation where you have a radical commie party that has 20% plus of the electoral vote. I think before these strategies can even be a thing, before they're not just weirdo Trotsyn or whoever, commies like me or whatever, sitting, you know, in tiny little organizations. Like, so one thing about it is, how do we get to a mass party? Like,
I could tell you how we don't get to a mass party. I sincerely believe that we will never get to that majority, that end goal, by trying to change. I can't say the Labour Party with any certainty, right? But the more you've compared the Labour Party to the Democratic Party in our past debates, the more I think this is a dead end. And I think the possibility, logically possible, yes, like, parties can change. Like, you can have a completely drastic change within either the Labour Party or the Democratic Party. But I think the social forces, right, behind a coalitionist party, and the Democratic Party isn't even nominally a Labour Party at all, right? Like, so let's not get that wrong. Like, we will never get to the majority support for a revolutionary minimum program. It'll never happen. Well, like, logically, not logically possible, but, like, plausibility. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, like,
yeah, like,
I don't know if I would write off majority support for, you know, a program like that, but I will say that, like, you know, the big first past the post coalition system, at least in the American context, seems like it will always be a check. It will always have the reformist veto that that McNair is talking about. I see exactly what he's saying, and I think splitting from that, you know, I'll defend that logic. And, like, the idea that we're going to block up with people that have, you know, not only non-revolutionary but not even reformist kind of viewpoint, and then convert them into, you know, some kind of evolutionary socialist formation is I mean, you know what, like, maybe I'm really just, like, blinkered by history, and I'm willing to take that, like, a look at that, but it that doesn't seem like the way towards majority report for a revolutionary socialist program, or for, you know, a socialist program at all.
I think also, I think in the U.S. specifically, if you want to do this kind of McNair strategy, you don't fuck with the Democrats, you fuck with the DSA. The DSA is these, you know, reformist adjacent that has a loyalist and some revolutionaries.
Yeah,
and I'm not
Right.
thrilled. I'm not thrilled by that.
Yeah.
That was a conclusion I came to, a couple weeks ago after doing one of these episodes that I was kind of uncomfortable with, actually.
But again, there are a lot of people that are abstentionists and a lot of people that are,
the DSA is the closest thing we have to like that formation.
Yeah, it's the closest thing we have to it. And, are the costs of associating with that worth it? And that's just a tactical question. It seems like there's a broad, like, strategic thing that we all share. And I don't know if it's just a matter of national context. I don't know the level of kind of nuance required to deal with that. But I guess to block up with a party that doesn't have the goal of replacing capital, but to serve capital, as in this paragraph, right? At being an alternative government within this political regime, like it invites a break. It invites a split because you have two different goals and you're just stapled together because of structure.
Look, I think say for the Democratic Party, it's much more difficult to do what's happened in the UK. I just think structurally there are loads of just bullshit and how it's actually formally controlled and set up. So personally, if I don't think it's possible to take a strategy that might work with a Labour Party and just implement that strategy in America. It's like getting towards that dumb idea of all these goddamn Leninist parties thinking that what haven't worked in 1917 is what needs to work in every country ever for the future of fucking humanity, right?
Yeah, that copy and paste.
So the problem we have is that we've got loads of people who are, I think in society, there are lots and lots of people who feel radical about politics, have got nowhere to go. Okay. And so what you have to be able to, what as leftists, we got to do in each different country is think of how do we get to that position where we can even start to represent those people, and, that's all that I'm exploring when I take the side.
Sure.
Goddamn Novara media, and everybody knows that. I don't think it's going to work, but we should interrogate the strategy, even not the strategy that is existent in the UK or the US, but even similar strategies. What could even help to pose or get our brains thinking about getting into that position? When I'm making these arguments, somebody, Dr. Foreman in the chat asked, are we all reformists? It's like, fuck's sake. Come on now, doctor. Right. But the thing is, we're looking for strategy. We're looking for strategies, and we shouldn't rule shit out. I do believe that we should, if we get a party that's big enough, we should abstain from fucking becoming a government. I don't think you should probably abstain from being, I don't know if you want to abstain from actually sitting in Parliament, because there is a propaganda element to it, but definitely abstaining from being the government. Let's move on, because we're talking about a whole load of stuff.
That's its own problem. But you know what? I'm glad that we can fucking go off about these things. We've thought about this quite a bit, these questions quite a bit. And I don't know. I think we've been fairly deflationary about the book towards the second half of this reading series. And it's just, I think, worth mentioning what a nice foil McNair is, and how useful he is for, starting to think through these questions.
Yeah. And I kind of roundly, on the whole, agree with his I agree with his strategy on the whole, but it's like saying that you agree with Lenin, in Russia on the whole or something, Yeah,
there's a fair amount of different things going on here.
Yeah,
there is. Not that I agree with Lenin in Russia. So I'll get that straight. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Lexie, you read this goddamn thing. Let's move on. I'm getting They're bullying me. Will people please tell them to stop bullying me? Okay, let's go.
Do a letter writing.
Tom is
campaign.
wrong.
This is my. Okay. This is by no means to reject altogether either coalitions or blocs around single issues, or electoral agreements that can assist in getting past the undemocratic hurdles set up to secure the monopoly of corrupt professional politicians, provided these blocs or agreements do not involve either commitment to form a government or suspension of criticism. It is perfectly acceptable to enter into such limited blocs or agreements not only with labor and similar parties, but also with pro-capitalist ones. With openly pro-capitalist ones. When, for example, the Liberals and some Tories opposed the religious hatred bill, they served the interests of the working class, whatever their reason for doing so. I think this is worth commenting on. The example he uses is fairly, innocuous and is just sort of, talking about a block around the single issue. But then, coalitions and electoral agreements kind of imply something else. And so this answers one of our questions. Does this only apply to a Labour Party? No, it also applies to pro-capitalist parties, including, a right-wing pro-capitalist party like the Tories.
Right. So if Tories are okay, why not Democrats? Which, and I think with the caveats given here, right? Commitment to form a government or suspension of criticism, you can kind of see that. And I think there's plenty of examples, like a pro-trans bill, for example, put forward by Democrats. I think socialists should totally block with Democrats on that. Like that's something worth doing. Or
right, instead of being like a complete left comm about it and being like, it's, keep this illegal for trans people,
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's dumb. So I think this does kind of elaborate on some of our debates earlier. I think entering into a government,
for example,
go ahead.
When he says this here, for example, the Liberals and some Tories oppose the religious hatred bill, that was that was being active against the hatred bill, but it wasn't saying forming a coalition with them in Parliament. It was more of a kind of being active with them against it.
And you don't form a coalition to not take government in parliamentary systems, if I understand them correctly. Is that right?
Is he referring to an informal coalition where if you're in a minority, you will agree to try to block certain bills or try to get certain things passed? Or I don't. Yeah, that is a bit unclear.
Yeah, I think in the UK there's been two different ones. One has been there has been a formal coalition. The Lib Dems have done it, and then the DUP this time with the Tories are in a confidence and supply agreement, whereby they're not technically in the government, but they will give them they will back them under certain types of votes, basically if they give them shitloads of money. So that's kind of, they got £1 billion for Northern Ireland, and they say we'll support you and stop your government from falling under certain circumstances. But even that,
go more.
I don't even think
that's really interesting. So they refuse to govern, but they're taking part of a governing coalition.
Yeah, they call it confidence and supply, which is basically so under, I think for confidence votes, so vote of confidence in the government, which would mean if you lost it, the government would fall. They would always vote to have confidence in the government. Then the other one is supply. I think they would say they would vote as a default with them on stuff, I think, if they didn't disagree with it too much. But they weren't technically in government. They didn't have ministers. So it was really a minority Tory government, but they had this kind of side, kind of weird, non-coalition coalition. But I don't even think that a commie one should get into that, because you're effectively supplying support to whoever is the dominant bloc.
So this is referring specifically to being in a minority, not forming a government, but being in the minority position forming coalitions with other people within the minority, even if they're conservative. Like, say you have the Tories are not for the say like the Tories form the government, the Liberals are in the minority. You could block with the Liberals on certain issues, but not the Tories. Is that what?
Well, I think he's saying. I don't know. Maybe he's specifically trying to. I know when I read it there, thinking about the supply and confidence agreement. So maybe that's what he's saying here. Provide these blocks or agreements. So once you're allowed to criticize, the thing is, yeah, maybe a supply and thing. I'll have to write that down as a question to ask him. Confidence and supply. Let me write it down here so I don't forget. Sorry. Okay. So I'm not exactly sure. Let's keep going though. Do you want to keep going, or does anybody have anything? Yeah.
No. That's all.
Let me read something here.
Go for it.
Professional. Let's let a professional do it now. Okay, here we go. Joking.
We know.
I went to school with a guy. I went to school with a guy called Joe King. True story. Very funny.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's just a bad dad joke. Stop.
That's true though. That is true.
Joseph King.
Joe King.
Gotta be joking.
Whenever we'd introduce him to somebody, we would always say, "Oh, you must be joking." That was the joke. Anyway,
oh my God. I'm sure he had a great sense of humor.
Not particularly, as far as I remember. But I probably shouldn't. I shouldn't slander the poor man.
Yeah, no, he's got to deal with a lot of shit. Your name is Joe King. Yeah, can you imagine?
Yeah, it'd be pretty bitter.
Yeah,
you must be joking. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're gonna fight for an opposition, Tom? Or
you're going to fight?
Should not take responsibility.
Okay,
that's Jesus.
Yeah. Let the professional take over. Okay. We should not take responsibility for government without commitment to radical democratic change, but we should propose or support both individual democratic reforms, such as the freedom of information or a reduction in the patronage powers of the Prime Minister, and reforms that strengthen the position of the working class, such as a national minimum wage or limitations on working hours. To oppose in the interests of the working class is also to build political support for the immediate defensive struggles of the working class against capital. Direct political support is valuable, but so is indirect support, where the Workers' Party at every opportunity challenges the undemocratic character of the political regime, its corruption, its statism, its dependence on the financial markets, and so on, and puts forward the alternative of the democratic republic. This activity serves to undermine the false claims of the regime to democratic legitimacy deployed against strikers, etc., etc. Lexie, Sophie, whoever, what do you think?
Well, undermining the, democratic niche, the ability of being able to use the electoral machine and being like, see, we have a mandate. That's almost something that already happens in governments now. But and it's definitely something that, we shouldn't be falling over ourselves. Be like, no, man, it's pretty democratic. It is obviously not democratic enough. However, again, I've said it before, this kind of stuff, makes you think that McNair, to be consistent, really should prefer parliamentary regimes to the Soviet regimes. Just to be consistent.
Yeah, he seems to be, I don't know. It's I don't think it's clear one way or the other, and that alone is a flaw, you could say.
I kind of think maybe he's vague about it, not to because he doesn't want to offend certain tankies, maybe.
That's very plausible and unfortunate in my estimation. But
because even though he kind of prefers the trots that liked the Soviet Union, I could see somebody doing that just because of how shitty the trots that went to social democracy were. And then, once, I don't know, upon reflection in our situation, would still be like, yeah, it's nice I could be gay in public and stuff,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this last night, but yeah, it's like a miniature version of the poison pill of choosing between Stalinism and liberal constitutionalism. Except for it's even sillier because we're dealing with Trots who never had power. But it's not like a dead question. It's just anyway. Getting back to McNair and circling back to this, like I think I don't know. I actually don't have anything to say.
Okay.
TBH.
Okay. Now,
Tom?
ladies and gentlemen, we've got some bad news or good news. We are on to the final, the very, very final chapter, segment of the entire book. 22 hours later, 22 hours, 48, 50 hours later.
Oh my
got
God.
Patience.
We sure do.
There we go. Special effects. Did you like that special effect?
I did like that special effect.
10 out of 10.
Damn, patrons. Y'all are really, stepping up Tom's game here. Thanks for doing it. Subscribe, patreon.com/from alpha to omega.
I got myself one of the drummers from the marching band from the Queen's regiment.
Wow.
Here today.
For a socialist podcast, it's pretty impressive, Tom.
Yeah, and on a good union wage. That's wonderful.
Well, no. I have him handcuffed to the radiator.
Well, yeah,
He's here against his will.
Drumming for the Queen.
This is a requisition from a specialist that's loyal to the previous regime, to the monarchical regime. So
I kind of I got him into the house. I kind of left like Tom Thumb. I left little stickers of the Queen Mother all the way along from the barracks in Woolwich all the way to my house. He finally came in. I hit him over the head with a frying pan, locked him to the radiator, got the drum, bought my drum out, and that was it. Right.
Well,
I feel like we should read every third word each in this paragraph, but that probably wouldn't work very well.
Yeah, this is a good way to make this immolate right at the end.
So, Sophie, why don't you take the last bit of reading? We'll do the whole shebang.
Should we do the whole shebang?
I think it's not that long. We should do the whole
page.
shebang.
It's only a page. Yeah,
right.
It's okay. There's some good French words in here. Should be good comedy for everybody listening here. Listen to these Yanks trying to say Italian and French words. Fantastic. Hit it.
The strategic sorry.
And some English words there. The English ones are hard too.
You're not wrong. Okay. The strategic orientation demands patience. The fundamental present problem is that the failures of the strategies of the 20th century and the absence of a Marxist strategic understanding, most socialists are socialists by ethical and emotional commitment only. This leads to the adoption of get-rich-quick solutions that enter into the capitalist politicians' government's game. This is the trouble with ideas that the LCR should join a new
Gauche pluriel.
Gauche
pluriel.
No, gauche pluriel. Gauche pluriel.
Gauche pluriel. Okay. This is
left unity.
Right. This is the trouble with the idea.
Will I read this? Goddamn. Will I read this? It's full of French fucking words to be here all day. Let me do this. Or do you want to do it, Sophie? Do you want to do it?
I mean, you didn't.
No, it's okay.
You didn't read today, Tom. To be fair, so
you read one paragraph actually.
Oh yeah.
Keep going, Sophie. Do it.
Okay. This is the trouble with ideas that the LCR should join a new gauche pluriel project rather than addressing seriously the question of unity with lutte au voix, with Referendum's decision to participate in the priority government, with the Linke's participation in a coalition with the SDP in Berlin, with the SSP's orientation to an SNP-led coalition for independence with respect. The result is not to lead towards an effective Workers' Party, but towards another round of brief hope and long disillusionment. A different sort of impatience is offered by those who split prematurely and refuse partial unity in the hopes of building their own, quote, Leninist party. The socialist alternatives split orientation in the process of formation of Die Linke, the splits of the Socialist Party and Workers' Power from the Socialist Alliance, and so on. We find that although these sects sell themselves as revolutionary, when they stand for election either to parliaments or in unions, their policies are broadly similar to the coalitionists. They are still playing within the capitalist rules of the game. The left, in other words, need to break with the endless series of failed quick fixes that has characterized with the 20th century. It needs a strategy of patience like Kautsky's, but one that is internationalist and radically democratic, not one that accepts the existing order of nation states. There, that wasn't so bad, was it?
Give us a lutte ouvrière.
Lutte ouvrière.
And rifondazione.
Rifondazione.
All right. That'll help.
Okay, and give us and also the SSP, let's say the Scottish Socialist Party orientation to a Scottish Nationalist Party led coalition for independence.
I'll read that
down
again.
there. So Scottish Socialist Party and Scottish Nationalist Party.
Okay. With the Scottish Socialist Party's orientation to a Scottish Nationalist Party-led coalition for independence, with respect.
Brilliant. Cool. That's it. Yeah. So, fucking hell, we're here. Like, this book, for me, is wrapped up, honestly, in the last two sentences. Like, if we want to get what we want from the book, the core of this book is the left, in other words, needs to break with the endless series of failed quick fixes that has characterized the 20th century, including that splits. It needs a strategy of patience, like Kautsky's, but one that is internationalist and radical democratic, and not one that accepts the existing order of nation states. That's it. Like, that's what is really brilliant about this book. Those two lines, the two sentences. Like, these things are kind of like obvious to kind of me, or was always my instinct. Whether I ever had it strategically explained, I would say no. But like it's very, very difficult to argue with those two sentences. What do you think?
I think, I feel like everybody who's participated in this reading series, we all have our quips and gripes about some of the details and some of the things that McNair is saying in the particulars. But at the core, with these two sentences that you're talking about, I feel like we all agree, except for maybe Derek, who's grumpy. But besides that,
but in principle,
I think Derek would agree with this.
Because his objection would be something like,
in the details.
Yeah, but how, like, does he mean radical democratic, or something like that?
Which I think is actually like a fair point, and I think like the broad strokes of these two sentences we agree with. But what does he mean by radical democratic? Like, does that even mean we still agree at that point?
And what isn't a failed quick fix? Is entryism into the Labour Party? Maybe that's not a quick fix or something, but how far does this go? Because Tom, you added in like splits. He actually doesn't say like splits here. And in fact, he argues for a version of, he defends Lenin in the classical social democratic split. But that doesn't mean that he would want people to like split right now from the Labour Party necessarily.
No, he has a sober interpretation of splits, which I can appreciate. Like, I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to do this kind of thing with like the Labour Party, or if we're going to do this kind of thing with the DSA, which, don't misquote me, I don't know if that's a good idea, but if you are going to do that, you would most likely at some point have to split. You just can't be a fucking trot about it and split the moment you get an itch. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it is, like, I think he has explicitly slammed the idea of patience is the absolute opposite of splitting in its current form. Like, so
Its
I
current-
think
In its
that,
current form.
Yeah.
yeah, like, so the whole thing is that we need to get to having a large radical party in every country, and in each country you might have different strategies to get to that position whereby you can implement this. You can
Yeah.
implement this as a small party, well, but it's meaningless. The Red Party in America could have been a McNair party, was it?
I mean, it was an
20
attempted
people.
McNair party. 20 people. You're being generous, Tom. No,
You know what I mean?
it was an attempt, and it could have had like a little bit of purchase in like a section of the Marxist center as it currently exists, maybe. Grant and I sometimes talk about where we'd be if our Leninist grift paid off. We could have been
in the jail.
Yeah.
Could have been a contender.
No,
No.
but like, if you wanted to play sect ball, you know what I mean, and like do that kind of thing, the most influence we would have, we could be influential, in lofts in Brooklyn more so than we are, or something along those lines. But yeah, that's about it. Like,
Right. And so I guess to me, like, from a strategic standpoint, like, what is there to do if like forming like a small irrelevant party isn't the thing? Like, where do we start? Like, sniffing around the Democrats isn't the thing.
like some kind of radical, I don't know, like I can't even really imagine in what kind of abstracted form of like radical democratic project would put a dent in the wheel here, to butcher some metaphors, like, because I kind of agree that like expecting unity on a socialist program immediately is like pretty like premature, because socialists don't even can't like plausibly draw up like real programs for some reason, in a way, at the moment. I don't really know what that is. Maybe it's just my ignorance on it, but it doesn't seem like that's really happening. Even the DSA stuff, or the sort of analytical Marxist adjacent attempts to put, blueprints for market socialism or something, just sound mind-bendingly utopian and seem to assume, a more habitable planet than they assume we're going, than it looks like we're headed for. And yeah, I guess I am for, a movement that is democratic and pluralistic, where socialist ideas aren't the common currency necessarily and have to be fought for. I'm for whatever radical democratic movement, whatever, is an actual sort of radical outburst, and whatever ways that can end up becoming democratically expressed, that energy, to the degree that it's not distorted, like entirely, like I'm for all that, but it's hard to imagine this in a way that it doesn't become, bourgeois coalitionist just by default. And for something to not immediately be a socialist movement or something, but has that radical democratic element against, the powers that be, like, is probably the orientation that soberly we end up having to take.
Right. And then how does that not basically just mean that the socialist bloc with like a vaguely populist kind of program or whatever, or is that even a bad thing? You know what I mean?
I don't think the populists have a program either. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe not program is the right word, but like there isn't a populist party either. Do we just block with like populists in some way? Like it does like, I think what you did was very illuminating and elaborating on like the problems that we face, but it didn't solve it either. I don't think you weren't attempting to either, but like I just keep like the thing that's kind of been unspoken this entire time about this book is it's assuming a lot more than what we have, and maybe this well, it's not even maybe, like, this isn't the case in a lot of European countries, right? But I think right now in the U.S. and it sounds like in the U.K. as well, like, how do we start this? How do we get a Kotskian like strategy of patience, Marxist center strategy off the ground that isn't just going to like look and smell like a coalitionist strategy? I don't know.
Like in this last section, okay, just to chew on some of these paragraphs more, right? Like, so after the failures of the 20th century, that's Leninism. That's also social democracy. And, to whatever degree there's a Marxist autonomous tradition that makes sense. It's not like it surged after the wall fell. So in the absence of strategic understanding, most socialists are socialists by ethical and emotional commitment only. 100% true. Totally real. There's even a whole move towards thinking of socialism as ethics first, in socialist thought.
Wow, a return to Kant. Whoa. Yeah. That's never been tried before.
It certainly hasn't. Nobody knows why you would ever leave that position. But the whole get-rich-quick solutions that feed into capitalist politicians, 100%. That's what happens. And so, but apparently this is the problem with these particular, like, left unity efforts, more or less. Which, I don't know, is that the problem with the left unity efforts? Because left unity efforts...
What's the problem?
The ethical and emotional stuff that leads to a get-rich-quick solution. Because I think this is broadly true for, like, a lot of the things where people are blocking with bourgeois parties and trying to make that happen. But for stuff like, I don't know, unity, like trot unity or something, or I don't know, I'm thinking of Marxist Center in the United States. A lot of these people believe in some kind of abstentionism, or some of them believe in abstentionism. A lot of them believe in abstentionism, actually, and a lot of them believe in sort of community organizing work that will take a long time and doesn't have an obvious immediate payoff. And obviously, in the back of their minds, they're building the movement so that they can stick a party on it. But that's a long, long, long ways off. For a lot of them, they're. I don't know if that's just the point that he's trying to address here, but I imagine that there are parallel situations like that in Europe. The problem isn't even get rich quick. It's like, is that they I don't know. Maybe it plugs more into his stuff about emotional and ethical commitments, but like the community organizers that think Pol Pot did nothing wrong or something in the back of their minds. Like, some of those people are in it for the long haul, but I guess that falls into the ethical and emotional thing. But these people are kind of the closest to trying to do something truly, truly independent.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, let's take like a Steelman version of that. For example, like, it's not some dork who's like standing Pol Pot in the back of their mind or whatever. Yeah, no. Let's take a Steelman version of that, and just somebody who wants to build up the, kind of going off of like a merger formula. Like, there's no point in building up the socialists if there is nothing to merge with, or whatever, however you want to frame it. Like, they're focusing on the social first because the political is so dismal right now, right? And then the idea of sticking the party on top of that, right? Like, not purely for incidental reason, but like they're trying to do Marxism, right? And once we have a social base, let's like tackle the political, right? Like, is that even such a bad idea?
No, it's not terrible. It's not like the worst. of the strategies. It's not going whole hog into the political sphere and, just reaping the social alienation. But, oh, no, it's not bad. That's why I'm wondering if this kind of like addresses what the problem with that is. Like, because I think there are problems with that. Like, in a way, they're insufficiently like discriminating about, totalitarianism in their ranks.
But like, is there one of us here that wouldn't send somebody to death for wearing glasses? I asked thee.
I'm taking off my glasses. What did you say?
You heard me. Oh no, I've got a cramp. Cramp. Oh fuck. Right. Do we have so like I could see in like I don't know if the listeners know, but I've had people from the Dutch Socialist Party and also I think from Swedish Socialist Party who've been listening to the series. Like I could imagine with a lot of pain that these young people and activists could actually try and democratize their socialist parties, and they could actually get radical, proper communist policies through, and they could not go into coalition, and they could grow, and they could be seen to work for the people. And I could see it working in Sweden, or I could see it working in Ireland, or I could see it working in France. I could actually see this as his strategy as an actual strategy that would work. When it comes to America, your problem is you can't get to that. You can't get to the stage where it could work.
Right.
You can't even get to the stage where it could work.
So PR is the difference, but maybe that's too reductive.
I
think PR is a massive difference.
Proportional representation.
I think where it can also work is like, so for example, if the Scottish Nationalist Party, for example, they're a Soc Dem party, but if they were like, if you have a nationalist thing going on, you can gain nationalists and you can gain radical commies, and you can do it that way too in a Firstpastthepost. Like in the UK, for example, the only places where the Labour or Tories aren't the party is in Scotland, in Wales, and in Northern Ireland. Because in Wales you got Plaid Cymru, they're the Welsh nationalists. In Scotland you got the SNP, Scottish nationalists, and in Ireland you basically have Northern Ireland. You got Irish nationalists, and then they actually don't even have the Tory party or the Labour Party up there for some weird reason. I think they were actually illegal at one stage. So they have like unionist parties and nationalist parties. So I think like in America, you don't have that kind of nationalism that's local. You don't have, in any real sense, you don't have free Texas, motherfuckers, free Texas. It's not a thing. There's a few weirdos. But
it's only an ideological thing, but it's folded into the big parties for the most part.
Right.
Yeah. So like I think that as a strategy, there are definite things I think we can take from McNair's work to those places and ideas. But like any proper chess player or poker player, the scene is different. The structural impediments are different. So the strategy should be different. Certainly up to a point. And I think that's at the point where I have most issue with the book. Like I think secondarily my issue with the book. Now we'll get into Cockshot's critique later on. So I think Cockshot has got some excellent critiques that go maybe somewhat further than McNair in certain directions.
Sure.
But my other critique is that the problem, the McNair thinks like Lenin and all these were right to split the split in the social SPD was correct. But like for me, the problem is before that. Like the problem is could you have the right split from you instead of the left splitting from the right? And that to me is the big error in strategy or politics of the SPD. Not so much just the simple voting for war credits. I think it seems to be that the fact that they lost that thing, or they weren't prepared, or they weren't really well up for that fight, knowing ahead that this fight was going to come. I find that is the major failing. Not so much they ended up voting for the war credits, like, because I'm sure there would have been a split. You would have the right split, like the right are splitting from Corbyn from weakness. You will have the right split from those from weakness. Like, to me, I think that McNair is too dogmatic around that thing. I think there's definitely some, I'm not saying I'm right, but I think that I am. No, I think that that is open. That question is open for debate. But when it comes to the idea of patience and all that, I wholeheartedly agree.
Well, you know why that is a little fetishistic and awkward about that specific moment is because if you take his strategy seriously, the initial merger of the Eisenacher Marxists, like the old school pre-SPD, SPD kind of formation, their merger with the Lassalleans was the mistake. That's the big mistake. Don't do that. And that would be the lesson of the whole thing, is don't do this. Or at the very least, if you're going to merge with them, then do it under a radically, communist program or something. Don't make so many concessions to them. Like you have to keep your program radical.
Yeah, wasn't it true that LaSalle was much more willing to compromise than what ended up happening? Actually, he was very desperate to.
That's what McNair said, and I don't know enough about the Lassallean
to confirm that.
Yeah,
gotcha.
I could tell you what you want to know. No, I'm joking. I could totally buy in with. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable. Honestly, I think that's nearly the better. That's I could imagine that the original group could have grown without the Lassalleans. I could imagine that could have happened to a to a large force. So if we were going to go somewhere
like their program.
Yeah, there's two things there. Is can you maintain? Is it possible? You're obviously at a disadvantage, but is it possible for you to bring in elements of the right and to stay on top of them? That to me is is probably against you, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. That's one thing I would say. I think it's a probability function. They didn't manage to do it. Maybe they could have done it. That's my kind of major point. And I think that if you do it, and to gain traction, part of your strategy could be to force the right out in. I think that's also a strategy to make it unpalatably radical, such that the right has to leave from a position of weakness, and then you have grasped and swallowed a lot of their support. So to me, that's also a strategy that's worth thinking about.
Right. There is an alternate sort of 1914 where Lenin's hero Kautsky doesn't waver in the face of war and says, no, not one penny, not one man. We're not doing this. And is much more strongly against the war and, and condemns the right much more strongly. Kautsky did have an inordinate amount of historic agency at that moment. Mm-hmm. If he hadn't been softened up to the Bernsteinian right so much, if he took a more radical position then, that could have been what happened, Tom, that they would have took a big mass of the workers with them, and the right would have thrown a big tantrum about it, and that there would have been a conflict that was more in the socialist favor. And so, that's possible. It's not totally impossible, but it's telling that history did go this way, right?
But
it's telling that even somebody like Kautsky didn't go that way.
Yeah, but it's a tiny sample, and the thing is, not even Kautsky. Some of Kautsky's politics were pretty goddamn mixed up and not as good.
On imperialism.
Yeah.
But even on the nature of Parliament and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it's we shouldn't make getting towards Puya's critique, which is correct, I think, if a little overstated, but that they should be done in probabilities, because you can't say because it didn't work once that it never work. And it's like I was a poker player, right? You can play perfect strategy and you can lose, right? You can go and play poker for 12 hours straight and you can play every hand perfectly according to your strategy, okay? And you can get smashed up because sometimes things aren't going to go your way. Sometimes luck, random occurrences come in and will destroy it. Destroy your plans. You look at a helicopter. It's designed and it really functions well, but sometimes a goddamn gust of wind will cause the damn thing to crash. You know what I mean? Even though it's designed for 99.9999% of gusts of winds. So your strategy could be correct and you could still get blown onto the rocks.
That doesn't appear to be the story of the 20th century.
No, I think it's, on the contrary, I think it's, well, at best you could say.
Your point stands, but what it appears to be, is that these, that strategic mistakes on the part of the Social Democrats and, the communists, were extraordinarily costly. You could be right that, actually they played their hand perfectly well. And, that would have been the winning strategy, but I don't know. What if something happened that, blocked that? But it's not, I guess, and maybe it's just an emotive point or a sort of, we live in this world where things turned out this way. So even if you're statistically right or something, try convincing a lot of people. Let's do that again.
Well, and I think Tom's point and Puya's point by extension is, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about, but I think their point is deeper. Like the point that Puya often makes is I'll say oh, well, this is failed X amount of times, sample size of not much, 1 to 10 maybe. Mm-hmm. And therefore it's dumb. And, Puya wants to do a probability because what if, it's the 11th time and it works,
But I mean, but how high a number do you need?
Right.
And we have kind of,
there's a counterpoint of this, when you're doing an analysis of history, you have a limited data set. So you have to go off of what you have available.
And there's hard sciences that have to function in a way like that, like astrophysics or something. There's some big cosmic events that there's, how many countries are there on the planet with parliaments? You know what I mean? The historic conditions are different, but there's at least some laboratory similarity. When you're studying a cosmic event like the Big Bang, a scientific approach to that is borderline metaphysical sometimes.
Yeah.
It just, I would be just careful. I agree with this point, but I don't know. I think
it has to be tempered. I agree with you.
I just sort of, I'm a little more, I trust our data a little more than I think that's kind of stream of argument does.
Sure.
I think, these things could have worked out, but the fact that they didn't, it might very well say something about this line of strategy, and we have to investigate.
It definitely does.
That.
It definitely does. It definitely does say something about the line of strategy. From a Bayesian statistical point of view, it increases the likelihood that it's the incorrect strategy. Undeniably, it increases the likelihood. And if you're a betting man, it should make you go for the other strategy and make that one more likely and try an alternative one. You shouldn't just keep trying the same strategy. Going by my,
I don't think that's what you're saying.
No, I know that, but you could take it to extreme. You could keep trying it, which is exactly what the fucking left does. It keeps trying Leninism. It keeps trying Trotskyism. It keeps trying anarchist ones. It keeps trying all these weird ass split ones. Would split our way to the fucking revolution. It's a bullshit.
Yeah.
Oh, is my internet gone? Hello, can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay, so the likelihood that sorry, so they keep repeating it. So the likelihood is that the probability that's correct will go down. Yeah. So, I certainly think it's the time for us to try a different strategy, and we should look theoretically, both empirically. What McNair does is good. He empirically looks at what was good, and he also looks kind of theoretically about what would make a good argument. And we should be combining those two. That's our lot.
Yeah. And
I don't think we should do the. I don't think we should do the today. I think we should wait, because there's a lot of people who probably want to talk on it. I think we should do another one.
Yeah. I think that sounds great.
Because there's quite a lot in it. It's 11 pages, and I certainly have a good bit to say on it. And I think Derek and Puya and Kyle as well would definitely have stuff to say. What do you two think?
Sophie stepped out for a moment, but I'm on board.
Sophie has been iced. Have you iced Sophie? Is that what's happened?
I have not iced Sophie. In fact, she's warming up with some coffee. Boom! You see the way I turned that around on you.
You did. That was very good. We have, speaking of coffee, speaking of coffee, we also have a person in the chat called Stephen T. There we go. Bet you never thought that would happen. Okay.
Stephen T. Hey, what's up, T?
What's up, T? That's okay. Let's just go to the chat here while Sophie's away. We got to thank James Knight. James was on the show previously. I met James at Commerce University. He forgot his cash. He's got no money. His Oyster card, like his Metro card, or whatever, he's got no money. He's got his bank card. So he's walking halfway across London, and he's listening to McNair in the rain. Good man, James. Who else?
James. Seriously, I hope that works out. So I'm glad we can keep you warm on this rainy autumn evening or whatever it is out there.
If a mugger mugs in tonight, they're going to be so pissed off. All they get is fucking McNair. No money.
What if it kind of changed their shit though? Like, God, it's all I got from this. That's it. I was homeless, but then I robbed the guy's phone and I listened to what he was saying. It all went downhill from there, no doubt. We also have Stank, Erica Whelan, Dr. Forbin, Jake P, Fugot. Fugot's new. I don't recognize Fugot. Will-eyed Woney. That's okay.
Well, that name.
Uh-huh.
That's a strange name.
I think I figured it out.
Constantine. Will-eyed Woney. I think I know it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who else do we have? Stephen T. Great name. Yara Handal is in there. Constantine. It's all kicking off.
Thank.
But Sophie, I think we should wait until we get the people, all the regulars back before we hit on Cockshot's critique.
100 years of Rick and Morty.
What do you think?
Oh my god. What am I gonna do? Family Guy references now?
Yes.
Oh,
what is that? Oh, I don't get that reference.
It's a bit from Rick and Morty.
It's a bit from an edgy TV cartoon for adults.
Lexie hates it. I think it's funny, but take it way too seriously, and I like making references to it just to tease her a little bit. The end of the first season, he goes on a rant about 1 million more seasons of Rick and Morty, and I think that's what we should do with this book. We should just never end it. Just keep on doing episodes.
I believe that's
season.
Okay, I don't know.
I think we have at least one episode left, perhaps two. But we have finished the book.
It's called BoJack Horseman. Yes, exactly.
I actually don't like. I don't like BoJack Horseman. I only like Rick and Morty. A lot of people feel the exact opposite.
You know what? I think I would like Rick and Morty minus BoJack Horseman. Like if you take the common philosophical elements out, that it would be a show that's imaginative that I'd be interested in watching. So basically, whatever the Lower Decks is going to be like, I think.
Yeah, I have high hopes for Lower Decks. Actually, I think that's going to be the best of them all.
Yeah. Anyway.
But I'm biased because Star Trek. Stan the Federation.
Stan. Section 31.
Stan. Well, I think the Section 31. Oh my god. The yeah,
That's the tankies of the Federation all defend Section 31.
Yeah, the tank of the Federation all defend space Cheka.
Yeah.
And Michael Burnham was about to be
Uh-huh.
sent to a space gulag, literally.
Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god.
when's it coming
Anyway,
back? When's it coming back?
They're bringing they're doing the short treks right now. So they have little 15-minute episodes. They're about to launch another one next week. They just did 2 last month. And then Picard.
Which one? Discovery or Picard
No,
next week,
no.
or is it Discovery?
It's a short treks, which is some kind of ambiguous between worlds. I mean, it looks like Disco, but you know.
It looks like Disco, but I think they're leaving the door open to use short treks to do Picard stories, basically.
Yeah.
It's basically anything new Trek that's too short to put in the main episode. So new Trek would be either Disco or Picard, or maybe Section 31, if that's actually a thing.
Yeah.
So people speculate the talk about a Section 31 show is really going to be the Pike Enterprise show, which I really want because I want more number one.
I mean, who doesn't? And anyway,
Ugh.
wrong podcast.
Wrong podcast.
Right. Wrong podcast. Let's finish it up, and we've technically finished the book, but we're not finished the series. It
Boom.
never dies. People ask me what we're going to do when this dies. We are going on to the 18th premiere
Yeah.
of Louis Napoleon.
Hell
I
yeah.
am more than halfway through now. I'm going to have to read it about 8 times to get all the French names in my head. So we're going to be starting that. We'll probably be starting that. I don't know when we'll be starting that. Maybe in December. What do people think?
Well, if it's going to be in December, it's probably more likely after the holidays, because you know how that's going to be.
Yeah.
I hear you. So we'll just say we'll go offline now. We'll say thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks for all the most imaginative names. Will-eyed one,
how do
Stank,
you
and
pronounce
Stephen T.
How do you pronounce Loki?
Lokai?
Is it Loki? Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, what's up, Loki? Stephen T is Loki on the Swamp Side Discord. So what up?
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah. 18. Stank says 18th is a hilarious read. It kind of is. It's pretty funny, and there's loads of brilliant writing in it.
Funny. He's a good. He's too sassy sometimes, though. But when he's funny, it really works.
Oh my god, wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, signing off. Okay, everybody.
Morty.
Ciao.
God. Bye. BoJack Horseman.